It was World War II. Machine guns, tanks, Stuka planes roaring in the sky. And amidst all that modern weaponry, a British officer appeared on the battlefield with a Scottish longsword, a medieval bow, and a bagpipe. This is not a Hollywood movie. This is Mad Jack Churchill, a British Army officer. He fought in World War II with a great sword, a bowman, and a set of bagpipes, the last British soldier in recorded history to have killed an enemy with a bow and arrow in war. And this is a crazy, unbelievable story, but it is absolutely true. Churchill was born in Colombo in British Ceylon to Alec Fleming Churchill and Eleanor Elizabeth, daughter of John Alexander Bond Bell, a native of Kelnahard, County Cavan, Ireland, and Dimboola, Ceylon. Alec came from a family long settled in Deddington, Oxfordshire, and served as district engineer in the Ceylon Civil Service, where his father, John Fleming Churchill, had also served. Soon after Jack's birth, the family returned to Dormansland, Surrey, where his younger brother, Thomas Bell Lindsay Churchill, was born. In 1910, the Churchills moved to British Hong Kong when Alec was appointed Director of Public Works and a member of the Executive Council. There, their third and youngest son, Robert Alec Farquhar Churchill, later a lieutenant in the Royal Navy and Fleet Air Arm, was born in 1911. The family returned to England in 1917. Churchill attended King William's College on the Isle of Man, graduating from the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in 1926. He served in Burma with the Manchester Regiment and developed a passion for motorcycling during his time there. In 1936, Churchill left the army and went to Nairobi, Kenya, to work as a newspaper editor and a male model. In 1938, he won second prize in the military pipe dancing competition at the Aldershot Tattoo. His excellent archery skills earned him a small role in the film The Thief of Baghdad, 1940. Before that, in 1939, he represented Great Britain at the World Archery Championships in Oslo and finished 26th. No relation to Winston Churchill, but his battlefield madness was probably second only to war. Before the war broke out, Jack was not your typical officer. He was an international archer, an extra who had acted in films, an adventure musician, and had a strange passion for swords and bagpipes. When World War II began, Jack did not see it as merely a military mission. For him, it was the stage, where he could use all his crazy things, bow, sword, trumpet, and almost fearless recklessness. He famously said, "An officer who goes into battle without a sword is not dressed properly." No kidding. He did. After the Nazi invasion of Poland in September 1939, Churchill immediately returned to active service and was assigned to the Manchester Regiment, which was later deployed to France with the British Expeditionary Force. There is a famous story that Churchill killed a German soldier with a longbow. However, he later clarified that his bow had been crushed by a lorry earlier in the campaign, so the story is actually an embellished anecdote. After Dunkirk, where he fought fiercely, Churchill volunteered to join the commando force. 1940, on the battlefields of France, the British Army was retreating in despair under the terrible pressure of the Wehrmacht. In the midst of the chaos, Jack Churchill commanded a small unit in ambush on the side of a village road. From a distance, they could clearly hear the hobnailed boots of the German soldiers approaching. A German officer appeared leading the reconnaissance squad, and that was the moment that entered history. Jack did not give the order to fire. He did not care about the machine gun right next to him. Instead, he raised his bow and aimed. A long steel arrow shot from a medieval bow flew through the early morning mist and pierced the German officer, killing him instantly. That moment is considered the last time in British military history that an enemy was killed by a bow and arrow on a modern battlefield. It wasn't because the British ran out of bullets. It wasn't because Jack didn't have modern weapons. It was simply Jack was still Jack, an unusual warrior in a modern war. During the Dunkirk campaign, when British forces were pushed back to the coast and the entire front fell into chaos, most units lost control. The sound of artillery shells, the sound of people screaming, the roar of German engines from behind, all blended together into a nightmare with no way out. But for Jack Churchill, chaos was where he shined. During a battle in the midst of a German encirclement, Jack suddenly put his bagpipes to his lips and played "Will Ye No Come Back Again." The mournful sound of the bagpipes rang out amid the gunfire, as if from another world, a world without war. As the last notes were still playing, Jack immediately threw a grenade at the enemy, and before the smoke cleared, he drew his Scottish Claymore sword, shouted the command, and led the charge. Imagine yourself as a German soldier at that moment. Amidst the smoke and fire in front of you is a man wearing a helmet and a British uniform, but holding a shiny sword in his hand. Behind you, the sound of bagpipes resounds, a sound that does not belong to modern warfare, but to ancient warriors charging into battle. It is not surprising that many German soldiers later remembered that image and gave him a nickname that was both fearful and respectful: the madman with the sword. After the crazy battles at Dunkirk, Jack Churchill's recklessness did not diminish. On the contrary, it seemed to be nurtured by the war itself. And by 1943, that courage brought him to the Commandos, the most elite unit of the British Army, specializing in carrying out daring and unexpected missions to the point of almost suicide. Night in the town of Neophi, Italy. Thick fog. The space was so quiet that you could clearly hear footsteps stepping on wet grass. Jack led a small group of soldiers silently approaching the German defense position. He carried his usual 3 weapons that no one in the world could have predicted would appear together in World War II: a sword, a gun, and a Highland bagpipe. When the order to attack was given, Jack did the unthinkable. He raised the bagpipe to his lips and blew a loud blast in the dark night, the sound of the bagpipes tearing through the silence like an ancient declaration of war. Without waiting for the sound to fade, Jack drew his sword, shouted, and charged forward to lead the attack. The attack happened so quickly that no one could understand what was happening. When it was all over, Jack's unit, which was much smaller, had taken the entire defense position and captured 42 German soldiers, a feat that even the British command was amazed. Why did the German army collapse so quickly? Perhaps it was because of the surprise attack. Perhaps it was because the commandos' firepower was too strong. Or perhaps, in those first chaotic seconds, the German soldiers truly believed that they were not British soldiers, but a medieval ghost sword in hand, trumpet blowing, rushing straight out of their own nightmares. After the feat of capturing 42 German soldiers in Italy, Jack Churchill's name spread throughout the commandos, but the war was not over for him. In 1944, Jack was sent to support the Yugoslav partisans on the island of Brač, and then on the island of Vis, places as fierce as the European front. And as always, Jack chose the front line. Not because he had to, but because that was his nature. A soldier always stood in the most dangerous place. In a fierce battle on the island, the British and Yugoslav partisans were overwhelmed by German fire. Artillery, mortars, and machine guns exploded around them. Jack's unit was slowly being destroyed. One fell, then another. And finally, Jack Churchill lay wounded, surrounded by his fallen comrades. As the Germans advanced to inspect the battlefield, they saw a sight they would never forget. Jack Churchill, the last living Briton, sitting upright on the grass, his shirt torn and soaked in blood, but still calmly playing his bagpipes. He played "Will Ye No Come Back Again," a nostalgic and mournful song, while flares whistled across the sky and gunfire echoed in the distance. No resistance, no escape, no fear. Just a soldier, holding a bagpipe sitting in the middle of a blazing battlefield as if sending off the war itself. The Germans stood still. They could not believe that before them was a prisoner of war, or an immortal ghost of Scotland. Jack was captured, but the image spread throughout the German unit, the image of a soldier sitting and playing a trumpet in the midst of death so calm that it shook even the enemy. It is said that if you make the enemy both afraid and not understand you, you have won half the battle. But the real trouble began when Jack Churchill was captured. Because he had the last name Churchill, the Germans immediately assumed he was related to British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. This led to Jack not being treated as a normal prisoner of war, but as a special prisoner. He was transferred to Sachsenhausen, one of the most notorious Nazi concentration camps, where prisoners they considered dangerous or important were held. But locking Mad Jack in a concentration camp was like locking a stray cat in a room full of wires. Something was bound to happen sooner or later. And it did. One night, Jack and a group of prisoners decided to dig a tunnel to escape. They quietly dug into the ground, clearing away every handful of dust, calculating every meter of the tunnel, until finally they were outside the barbed wire fence of Sachsenhausen. Jack walked more than 130 kilometers through the forest, through deserted villages, making his way to the border in the hope of meeting the Allies. But fate tested him once more. Jack was captured near the city of Rostock. This time he was transferred to another camp, located in Tyrol in the middle of the majestic Alps. But the war was nearing its end. The SS prepared to execute all prisoners before withdrawing, so that no one could testify against them. But something unexpected happened. A group of Wehrmacht officers, the German regular army, refused to carry out the killing order. They stood up to protect the prisoners, causing a tense confrontation with the SS. And finally, the Wehrmacht unit left, leaving the camp in chaos. Without needing anyone to rescue him, Jack freed himself. He continued walking, crossing the snowy mountains, following the trail until he met the American soldiers. Imagine this: he was captured, braked out of prison, recaptured, moved to a new camp, almost executed. Then he found his way out through the Alps. And after all that madness, what was Jack's reaction? He asked his superiors a question that left everyone speechless. Where's the next war? World War II ended, but the fire in Jack Churchill did not. While the whole world breathed a sigh of relief for peace, Jack continued to stay in the British Army, as if war had never left his blood. He was sent to Palestine during a period of intense conflict, and here Jack proved that his reckless nature had not faded after the war. Once while he was traveling by train, a group of guerrillas suddenly attacked the train. Most people panicked, falling to the floor to find shelter, but Jack was different. He jumped off the train, ran into the gunfire, organized the counterattack, dispatched medics, and cleared the way for survivors, all with astonishing calm, as if this were a battle rehearsal rather than an actual attack. The world, however, was changing. The swords, bows, and bagpipes were no longer in the battlefield. Modern warfare had entered the era of high-tech bombs, and eventually of nuclear weapons. For many soldiers, it was a relief, but for Jack Churchill, perhaps a vague regret. When he heard about the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Jack said something half-joking but completely in character. If it wasn't for those damn Yanks and their atomic bombs, we could have kept this war going for another 10 years. If it weren't for the Americans and their damned atomic bombs, we could have continued the war for another 10 years. A quote that rang out in peacetime. At once humorous, at once bitter, and at once Mad Jack, a soldier who seemed to be born not to live in peace. After the war, Jack Churchill was discharged. He began to learn to live normally. But Mad Jack's so-called normal, as one might guess, was unlike anyone else's. He surfed the English coast, where the wind was biting the water prickling. Not Hawaii, not California. It was gray, cold England, but Jack was still standing there on his surfboard, laughing like a child. He often got on the wrong train, not because he was confused, but but because he liked it. He liked to sit and watch the countryside pass by the window, likes to get off at any station then, walk home no matter how far. At veteran reunions, Jack always appears with a leisurely demeanor, mischievous eyes, a gentle smile full of life, as if all the crazy things he had done were just a long adventure that he accidentally got lost in. Jack Churchill died in 1996 at the age of 89, an unbelievable number for a man who had survived Dunkirk, Italy, Yugoslavia, concentration camps, prison breaks, machine guns, artillery explosives, kamikaze, and hundreds of times facing death at a distance of just a few meters, and yet he still returned home, put the sword on the shelf, hang the bow on the wall, and then lived a strangely peaceful life. And he left the world with a question no historian has been able to answer. How could such a man survive in modern warfare? Americans love stories about people with strong personalities, people who face their fears, who stand alone and by their very presence change the atmosphere around them. Mad Jack Churchill was not an American soldier, but his spirit, it was very American. He refused to fight like a machine. He brought his own personality and style to the battlefield, making each battle a statement of identity. For Jack, the goal was more than just survival. He wanted to be himself even when surrounded by a hell of bullets, hot steel, and smoke. In a world increasingly numbed by industrial warfare, Jack chose to carry a sword, a bow, and the sound of Scottish bagpipes. Mad Jack Churchill was more than just a soldier. He is a reminder that even in the midst of modern warfare, people still have the right to retain their souls, their individuality, and their freedom. A warrior, a legend, a living manifesto of difference. Mad Jack Churchill is a reminder that in every war, among the dry numbers of casualties and the battle lines, there always exist people who are different. Eccentric, strange, even a little crazy, but it is they who make history vivid and unforgettable. A British officer who fought in World War II with a sword, a bow, and a bagpipe was recorded as the last man in the British Army to kill an enemy with an arrow, escaped a concentration camp, escaped death multiple times, and survived battles that would make ordinary people shudder to imagine. If you liked this video, please press like so YouTube knows you care about crazy but true war stories like this. And if you want to continue watching the series about extraordinary soldiers, fierce battles, and breathtaking war moments, don't forget to press subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because in the next video, we will continue to meet characters that even Hollywood wouldn't dare to write into the script. Thank you for watching. You are not just a viewer, you are a living book, so that these events and people will be remembered forever.